I feel like we have to start living our lives like active participants rather than, I guess, distant observers. In saying that, I don't necessarily mean that you can't observe the things going on, but I think appreciation is more important than observation. I think that your life is always going to be filled with what you give it. And in saying that, I mean, if you want something in your life, or if you want positivity to be there, or if you want any good or any, I guess, instantiation of yourself to be there, you have to put it there. You can't be in the world if you're not the one that actually instantiates yourself in it. And that's what I mean by, you can't live in your mind if you want to live in the world. Because I feel like a lot of things live in reference, and one thing we shouldn't do is live in reference to anything but ourselves. I don't mean be narcissistic or not care about anything or blah, blah, blah. I mean intently care about yourself. Understand that the love you give yourself will always be expressed in the world in ways that you don't even know. But simply, for me, I think it's just giving yourself that affirmation and validity in order to go out into the world and do whatever you need to do. Because if you give yourself that kind of support and that kind of love, then it's not necessarily saying that you're going to get love back, but saying that because of that love, you're able to do things that you love or find out new things that you love in order to keep moving forward with your life. Placing things within your life, I don't feel like it's necessarily just a thought thing either. I feel like it has to be expressed in some sort of way to get out there. Like if you want yourself to be able to, I guess, I don't know, do some trick or some backflip or something like that, sometimes you gotta practice. And I feel like sometimes it's that practice that deters us from doing it because we feel like why should we have to work for something that we want to be inherent to ourselves? But that's everything. I think we don't realize how much of ourselves is dictated by our past. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean living in the past in reference to building your future, but I mean how much time and effort and devotion and how much development it took to get to the point that we're at today. And I think there's a certain amount of gratitude we have to have for our general experience and general life for bringing us to the point we are at. And that's not to say, you don't want to get better or you're not appreciating or bringing your future self to your current self by appreciating who you have yet to become. But to say, in appreciation of where you are, you have to reference sometimes where you've been. And I don't mean that in the sense to say, live in the past and think about those things, but have gratitude for who you are now. There's certain experiences, certain things in my life, of course, I wish I hadn't gone through. But to that same extent, they brought me to where I am. And if I'm going to appreciate where I am today, it's also about letting go of the past grievances and trauma and past anything in order to put new things into life. Because I feel like what isn't resolved always repeats. And even if it's something that isn't necessarily lingering on, I feel like general appreciation for the life we've lived is important. Because what you want in your life, you have to place at some times. And I feel like this placement isn't really a placement of feeling, a placement of some type of happiness, gratitude, this, that, and the other, but a placement of self. I feel like it's the more we put ourselves into the world around us, the more we put ourselves into our life, that it becomes more for us. And I feel like if we don't do things for our benefit, or if we don't do things not necessarily solely for us, but with us in mind, then we're constantly going to be writing a story that leaves us out. And what I'm thinking is, you can't write the story wrong if you're the one writing it. Or if it's your story, it can't be written wrong. Or if it's, I guess, your path, you can't be in the wrong place. I feel like if you are the path and if you are the person with the pen, if you are the person sort of dictating this stuff for you, then the responsibility is yours. But that's not to say stress about it or, oh, I have to do this for my life. I have to organize this. I have to make sure this is in order so I can do this. But saying that you have to be present enough with yourself to realize when you can do those things. Because I feel like a lot of times we suffer more in thought at the possibility of certain actions and the possibility of certain responsibilities that we have yet to have. Simply because, I'm not sure. Because we allow them to stress us out before they actually occur because we're living in our mind. And that's what I mean by living in reference to things that have yet to come. It's important, I feel like, when you're trying to, I guess, manifest or bring things into your life that you envision that in the future. But it's not important to necessarily live in that. It's important to, I think, embody a certain feeling or a certain mentality or a certain way of life that is exemplary of that. But I don't necessarily think you have to constantly repeat those thoughts in your head in order to, I guess, get to the point where you want to. If you have to affirm yourself with like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be able to do this, or I'm so grateful that this has happened. That's one thing. But I feel like our mind takes us away from so much a lot of times. And I think that the mind is very much a tool and not a console. I don't think it's something that we constantly have to go to in order to figure out, how we feel about something or how we are or how this is, that, and the other. Because who we are, I feel like, is so much more easily expressed than it is thought about. I feel like we spend so much time and thought in reference to who we are, to the point where I think we lose track of who we are because we're trying to find ourselves in something that is a fragment of us. And in that way, we become fragmented by that which we use to help find us. We constantly live in reference to our mind, and I think that's not necessarily always a problem, but I think it's a problem when we're trying to, decide who we are, I guess, traversing the world in a way of comfort. Because if the mind is only a fragmented part of us, if it's only a small instantiation of who we are, because I think we can all agree that who we are isn't just the mind. It's not just what we think about, but there's also some substance behind that. And if we're using the mind, then why should we use that small instantiation of who we are to define our entire character? And that's what I mean by it's more easily expressed. Because I feel like if we're constantly taking those steps back, we can't get forward. The mind doesn't predict the future, and the mind isn't necessarily always present. So whatever you're referencing in your mind has either already passed or it doesn't yet exist. And that's why I think it's important to live in the present. Because that's where our relative control is. That's where our relative influence is when it comes to ourselves. You really have to be present with yourself and intent with whatever you do. Otherwise, I feel like it's going to feel like you're slipping, even if you're not. Because simply your mind is sort of lagging behind you. It's lagging behind your actions and lagging behind your stages. That's why I feel like somewhat dissociation with life is. It's living more in the mind than in the present moment. And I feel like I didn't realize that until pretty much just now. That any type of stagnation or any type of stuckness we have with the world isn't a lack of presence with the world, but an abundance of presence within the mind. I feel like it's the way that we live in something that can't be present, that we lose our presence. And I think a lot of us think that consciousness is some type of overthought when it's not. I think it's important to realize that your consciousness or your, I guess, self is really just awareness. It's how much you can perceive and how much of yourself you put within yourself in the present moment. How much of your awareness you put within yourself in the present moment to allow yourself to traverse the world in a way that's befitting of you. If you don't take the pen and write out your own story, then something else is going to write it for you. If you don't fill the vacancies within yourself with something good, they're going to be filled for you. And that's why I feel like it's important to sort of learn the idea of somewhat like renovation. And I talked about this in some videos, I guess like some months ago, in regards to like the house analogy. Because if everybody's a house, you always have some bricks that need to be cast away. But I don't ever think it's about getting rid. I think it's about renovation. It's about taking what old parts you no longer think serve you and making them better for you. Because it's not like you can just up and grab new bricks. Because each and every part of you is always going to be there. It's about transforming it into something that you find beneficial. Your patience is only in reference to your impatience. Your kindness is only in reference to whatever the opposite of kindness is. Anger, meanness, whatever. Regardless of which, I feel like it's important to realize that light is only in reference to dark. How much you're able to traverse the world and how much you're able to express is really just about how much of yourself you allow. And I think that's been a pretty prominent topic in my videos recently, but the idea of allowing yourself. or allowing yourself to occupy the space that is you. I feel like it's once you do that that you actually see what you not necessarily even need to do, but what you want to do in order to make yourself, I guess, more comfortable with who you are, or not even that, but better. And when I say better, I don't necessarily mean that what you are is not good or is not a positive thing. But even with myself, I feel like I'm always sort of on a tinge of like, oh, that's a good way to be, or that would be a good thing to have in thought in reference to, like, I guess having new things with my mentality or mental philosophy or whatever. But a lot of times I just make that intention. Like, I'm like, oh, I want to practice being like more patient, or I want to learn how to stay on top of my mentality like 24/7. And I try to intently do that rather than to think about how to do it. Like, I just try to be a active participant in my own life and be present enough to realize what I need to do to make those choices. And with me, a lot of times it's just being present, trying to do my best to be present and intentional with each and every one of my actions so I can do my best. Because I feel like doing your best is only a reference to how present you can be. And that's why I feel like you really just have to do your best and be yourself. I feel like once you do those two, anything in life or anything in your life is not necessarily stress free. Because of course there are going to be situations and things that I feel like take you out of that moment. But in regards to anything in regards to yourself, like your mentality, your feelings, your whatnot, your mental clarity, I feel like it really lines up once you're able to truly invest yourself in the life that you live. And that's what it means by your life is filled with what you give it. And if you fill your life with your expression, with you, and you love who you are, then it's always going to be filled with love. I talked about it in previous videos as well, that, in realizing that it's you and the situation, you have to realize that whatever you bring to the situation will be present within it. And if you want to bring that positivity and instantiate that kind of good that you want within it, then you have to bring it. But in reference to your own life, you just have to bring that within yourself. In saying that, I just mean you have to practice your self-love in a very intentional way, or gratitude or niceness or kindness or positivity within yourself. So whatever you want is going to be expressed within the world, but not necessarily expressed within the world because the world's expressing it, but because you're in the world and you're expressing it. And I think that's what's important. The realization that you can pretty much give yourself whatever you need. Not everything, but pretty much anything you need. And I feel like it's important to not necessarily pick and choose, but understand what you need in a given moment. And I think that's just from being present enough to listen, present enough to see as well what you need to do in order to do this and how you feel about certain things. Because to run from feelings in a lot of ways is just run from yourself. And if we're running from ourselves, we're never going to be able to, I guess, address the parts of ourselves that seek out change. Because if the thing that wants to change is us, and we're ignoring ourselves, and we're never going to, or not in a way that I find will be beneficial to who we are as people. The benefit to being present, I don't feel like is just growth, but positive growth, or growth in a way that we feel is befitting of who we are. I said it in, I think, just the last video, but I think that we grow regardless. There's always going to be circumstances and events, I feel like, that will alter, not necessarily alter our character, but make us fit our expression into a certain box. And I feel like if you can realize that a lot of things are pulling your strings, you should make sure that you're one of them. I feel like that's the subtle importance in presence, and that's the subtle importance in filling your life with whatever you want to be there. And if you want yourself within your life, then you have to put it there. Because not everything is going to be in reference to you. And like, I feel like, if anything, you know what you need more than anything else. And you know what you want more than anything else. And that's why I feel like it's important to sort of work in your own favor, rather than wait for things to sort of line up. Because when you wait for life to happen, it passes you by. And we can't wait for life to happen. Life is always happening. And we can't wait for ourselves to get here, because we're always here. I think it's just about the subtle realization that, you can only find yourself where you are. With that being said, thank you for watching the video. If you made it this far, thank you. If you didn't, thank you anyway. I really appreciate you guys again. Please make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're doing what you need to do in order to not necessarily be yourself, but take care of yourself. Because I feel like self-care is a very important aspect of, I guess, comfort with life or general contentment with who you are as a person. I feel like it's always going to be the validity that you give to yourself that allows you to not need it from the world around you. All in all, thank you. Oh, and